When we got back to the house, Jake and his father were standing apart, not looking at each other. Jake's face was carefully blank, but I could see the muscles jumping in his jaw, the way his hands were clenched at his sides. "So," Richard turned to the Harrisons, "what do you think?" "It's perfect," Mark said enthusiastically. "Better than the photos. We're prepared to move forward with our offer." Richard nodded, pulling out his phone. "Excellent. I'll have my attorney draw up the papers. We can close within 30 days. "Dad, wait," Jake's voice was strained. "I'm asking for 3 more months, that's all. 3 months to." "To what, Jacob?" Richard's patience was clearly wearing thin. "We've been over this. You don't have a viable solution. The easement proposal failed. The ranch isn't profitable. You've given this your best effort, but sometimes you have to know when to cut your losses." "This isn't a business balance sheet," Jake said, his voice rising. "This is Mom's legacy. This is everything she loved, everything she wanted to preserve." "Your mother is gone." Richard's voice was flat, but I saw pain flash across his face. "And she wouldn't want you to bankrupt yourself trying to save something that can't be saved. She'd want you to be practical." "You don't know what she'd want." Jake's control was slipping now. "You sold her piano the month after she died. You got rid of her art studio, her garden. You've been trying to erase her from this place since the day we lost her." "That's not fair." "Fair?" Jake laughed harshly. "You want to talk about fair? You bought this place for her because she fell in love with it. You watched her spend every day here, working this land, raising me to love it the way she did. And the second it became inconvenient, you decided it wasn't worth keeping. So don't tell me about fair, Dad. Don't tell me what Mom would want." The silence that followed was painful. The Harrisons looked deeply uncomfortable, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. Richard's face had gone red, anger and grief warring in his expression. "I loved your mother," he said quietly. "Everything I've done has been to honor her memory and secure your future, if you can't see that." "I see that you're giving up," Jake's voice broke, "on her dream, on this place, on me." Richard flinched like he'd been struck. For a moment I thought he might relent, might give Jake the time he was begging for, but then his expression hardened. "I'm doing what needs to be done." He turned to the Harrisons. "Let's proceed with the sale." Jake made a sound like he'd been punched. Without another word, he turned and walked away, heading toward the barn with long, angry strides. I looked at Richard, at this man who'd called me out of the blue and set all of this in motion, and felt a surge of anger. "You're making a mistake," I said quietly. Richard looked at me with tired eyes. "You're young. You don't understand the realities of business and finance. Sometimes the right decision is the hard one. I understand that your son has worked himself to exhaustion trying to save this place, that he's brilliant and dedicated and has more integrity in his little finger than most people have in their whole body. I understand that some things matter more than profit margins and balance sheets." I took a breath, trying to control my temper. "You asked me to come here. You called me because you said Jake needed help. Well, I'm telling you right now, he needs you to give him a chance. Not 3 months, not even 1. He needs you to believe in him the way his mother did." Richard's expression was unreadable. Did he send you to say this? "No, he doesn't even know I'm talking to you, but someone needs to tell you that you're about to lose your son along with this ranch." I met his eyes steadily. "Is that really what you want? Because once you make this sale, once you take away the thing he loves most in the world, there's no coming back from that." For a long moment, Richard just looked at me. Then he glanced toward the barn where Jake had disappeared, something complicated crossing his face. "The sale is happening," he said finally. "I'm sorry if that upsets you, but the decision is made. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to discuss terms with the Harrisons." He walked away, leaving me standing there feeling helpless and angry and heartbroken for Jake. I headed toward the barn, needing to find him, I didn't even know what, comfort him, apologize for failing, figure out what the hell we did now. I found him in the same stall where we'd kissed 2 nights ago, sitting on the floor with his back against the wall and his head in his hands. He looked up when I entered, and the devastation in his eyes made my chest ache. "It's over," he said flatly. "He's selling. The Harrisons get everything and I get." He laughed bitterly. "I don't know what I get. To watch them tear it all down and build their luxury resort, I guess." I sat down beside him, our shoulders touching. "I'm sorry, Jake, I'm so sorry. I thought we could fix this. I really thought." "It's not your fault." He leaned his head back against the wall, staring at the ceiling. You tried harder than anyone had a right to expect. But some things can't be fixed, no matter how hard you work." We sat in silence for a while, the sounds of the barn, horses shifting, hay rustling, strangely comforting. Finally, Jake spoke again. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "Okay." Is this why you came back? Because my dad called and you felt obligated? He still wasn't looking at me. Or was it because you actually wanted to? Both, I said honestly. At first I came because he called and it sounded urgent. But Jake, I stayed because I wanted to. Because being here with you felt right in a way nothing has felt in 3 years. Because I never stopped. Don't, he finally looked at me and there was something broken in his expression. Don't say it, Carter. Not now. Not when everything's falling apart. Why not? I grabbed his hand, held it tight. Why can't I tell you that I love you? That I've always loved you, even when I was too scared to name it. Jake's eyes closed and I saw moisture leak from the corners. Because if you say it now, if we start this now, I'll have nothing left. The ranch will be gone and I'll still have you, and I won't know if, his voice broke. I won't know if you stayed for me or because you felt guilty about the ranch failing. Jake, I need some time. He pulled his hand away, stood up. I need to think, process all this, figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do now. Let me help you, please. We'll figure it out together. I can't think when you're here. It came out harsh and he immediately softened. I don't mean that the way it sounds. I need space, Carter. Need to sit with this without. He gestured helplessly between us, without this complicating things. It felt like being gutted. After everything, after finally admitting how we felt, after the kisses and the hope and the promise of figuring things out together, he was pushing me away. Okay, I said quietly, standing up, if that's what you need. It is, but he didn't sound certain. He sounded lost. I wanted to argue, to tell him that pushing me away was exactly the wrong thing to do, but I also understood. He'd just lost everything he'd been fighting for. He needed space to grieve, to process, to figure out who he was without this ranch that had defined him for so long. I'll head back to the house, I said, pack my things, give you space. You don't have to leave today. Yeah, I do, because staying here, watching him hurt, not being able to help, it would break both of us. But Jake, when you're ready to talk, when you've had time to think, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere, not really. He nodded but didn't respond, and I left him there in the barn, surrounded by the pieces of his shattered dreams. Packing took less time than I expected. I hadn't brought much, and most of what I'd worn had been Jake's anyway. I left his clothes folded on the guest bed, changed into my own, and stood in the room one last time. Less than a week ago, I'd driven up here in a storm, terrified and hopeful. Now I was leaving with my heart in pieces and no idea how to fix any of this. I found Richard in the kitchen, alone for once, staring at his phone. He looked up when I entered. Leaving already? His voice was neutral, but I caught something else underneath. Guilt, maybe. Yeah, Jake needs space, and I need to get back to Seattle anyway. My job, my life. The words felt hollow. Did I even have a life in Seattle anymore? Or had I just been going through the motions for 3 years, waiting for an excuse to come home? For what it's worth, Richard said, I didn't call you to make things harder for him. I thought if anyone could help him see reason, it would be you. See reason? Anger flared hot in my chest. You mean give up, accept that the thing he loves most in the world isn't worth fighting for? Richard's jaw tightened. You think I don't know what this place meant to my wife, what it means to Jake? I drove up here every weekend for years, watching her fall in love with this land, with this life. I supported her dream even when it made no financial sense. But she's gone, Carter. And I won't watch my son destroy himself trying to keep something alive that can't be sustained. Maybe it can't be sustained because you never really believed in it. The words came out sharper than I intended. Jake told me you wanted him to join the bank, to follow in your footsteps. Did it ever occur to you that he chose ranching not just because of his mom, but because it's genuinely who he is? Of course it occurred to me. Richard's control was cracking now. You think I don't see him out there every day, doing work that would break most men? I see him, Carter. I see him exhausting himself, sacrificing everything, and for what? So he can barely break even. So he can watch this place slowly fail despite his best efforts. Then help him. I slammed my hand on the counter, frustration boiling over. Give him the 3 months he's asking for. Give him a chance to find another solution. Be his father instead of his creditor. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Richard stared at me, and I saw something shift in his expression. Surprise, maybe, that I'd pushed back this hard. You love him, it wasn't a question. Yes, I didn't see the point in hiding it now. I love him. I've loved him since we were kids, even when I was too stupid to realize it, and I hate watching you give up on him. Richard's shoulders sagged, and suddenly he looked every one of his 60-some years. I'm not giving up on him, I'm trying to save him from himself. Can't you see that? This place is a black hole. It will swallow every bit of energy and money and hope he has, and in the end he'll have nothing. At least if I sell now, he'll have resources. He can go back to school, can build a different life. a better life. A life you've chosen for him, I said quietly, not one he's chosen for himself. Sometimes we have to make hard choices for the people we love. Richard met my eyes, even when they hate us for it. I didn't have a response to that. Maybe he was right. Maybe fighting for a failing ranch was futile, and Jake would be better off in the long run. But watching him in that barn, broken and defeated, that hadn't looked like someone who would be better off. That had looked like someone who just had his heart ripped out. I need to go, I said finally. Tell Jake. I stopped. What could I tell him? That I was sorry, that I loved him, that I didn't know how to fix this. Tell him I'll call when he's ready. Richard nodded, and I walked out of that house for what might be the last time. The drive back to Seattle was a blur. 6 hours of highway and rest stops and gas stations, my mind replaying every moment of the past week. The kiss in the barn, the way Jake had looked at me when he realized I'd never stopped caring, the devastation in his eyes when his father had announced the sale. I'd failed him, I'd promised to help, had given him hope, and then watched it all crumble because of a 70-year-old surveying error that none of us could have anticipated. Logically, I knew it wasn't my fault. Emotionally, it felt like I'd let him down in the worst possible way. My phone rang when I was an hour outside of Seattle. Marcus. Hey, I answered, my voice rough from not speaking for hours. You sound like hell, he observed. Where are you? Almost home. I left Montana this morning. Left as in you're coming back, he sounded surprised. I figured you'd decided to stay out there actually. You've been gone almost a week. Yeah, well, things didn't work out the way we hoped. I didn't want to explain the whole story, didn't want to talk about Jake's face when his father had made the final decision. The ranch is being sold, Jake needs space, and I need to figure out what the hell I'm doing with my life. Marcus was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, I'm sorry, I know how much this meant to you. It meant more to Jake, I was just trying to help. Carter, his voice was gentle. You drove 6 hours in a storm because his dad called. You dropped everything to help him. That's not just trying to help. That's love, man. Anyone with eyes could see it. Hearing someone else say it made it real in a way it hadn't been. Yes, I loved Jake. Yes, I'd probably always loved him. But what did that mean when he'd asked me to leave? When he'd said he needed space to figure things out? I don't know what to do now, I admitted. Well, for starters, you need to sleep. You sound exhausted. Then maybe you call your boss and explain that you've been having a personal crisis. Then, he paused, then you figure out if you're going to stay in Seattle or not. What? Come on, Carter, you've been checked out of this life for 3 years. I know it, your boss knows it, hell, probably our neighbors know it. The only person who didn't seem to know was you. Marcus sighed. I'm not saying this to be mean. I'm saying it because you deserve to be happy. And if that happiness is in Montana with some rancher who makes you drive through storms and work yourself to exhaustion, then maybe you should stop pretending Seattle is where you belong. He told me to leave, I said quietly. He said he needed space. Because his world just fell apart. Give him time. Let him process. But don't give up, okay? I watched you try to move on for 6 months, and it was like watching someone try to breathe underwater. Don't do that to yourself again. After we hung up, I sat in my car outside my apartment building, staring up at the familiar facade. I'd been living here for 3 years, had dated Marcus in this apartment, had worked late nights on projects at the kitchen table, had convinced myself I was building a life. But Marcus was right. I'd been going through the motions, never fully present, always with part of myself somewhere else. Inside, the apartment was exactly as I'd left it, clean, modern, anonymous. It looked like it belonged to someone, but not to me. Not really. I dropped my bag and collapsed onto the couch, pulling out my phone. There were no messages from Jake. I hadn't expected any, but the absence still strung. I should sleep, should call my boss, should figure out damage control for the work I'd neglected. But instead, I opened my laptop and started researching. Property law in Montana, historical land surveys, legal precedents for disputed boundaries. If there was a solution we'd missed, I'd find it. Even if Jake had asked me to leave, even if he needed space, I couldn't stop trying to help him. Because that's what you did when you loved someone. You didn't give up, even when they pushed you away. The next morning, I forced myself to go into the office. My boss, Sandra, took one look at me and herded me into her office. You look like death warmed over, she observed, closing the door. Want to tell me what's been going on? So I did. The whole story spilled out. Jake, the ranch, the failed proposal, everything. Sandra listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. And you're in love with him, she said when I finished. It wasn't a question. Is it that obvious? Carter, you just spent 20 minutes talking about property easements and conservation law with more passion than I've ever seen you show about a design project. Yeah, it's obvious. She leaned back in her chair. So what are you going to do about it? I don't know, he asked for space. His father is selling the ranch in 30 days. There's nothing I can do. Bullshit, Sandra's bluntness surprised me. There's always something you can do. You just haven't figured out what yet. Sandra. Listen to me, she leaned forward, her voice intense. I've watched you work here for 3 years. You're talented, creative, reliable, but you've never been happy. Not really. I always figured you were dealing with something, and now I know what it is. So here's what I'm going to tell you. If you want to go back to Montana, if you want to help this guy save his ranch, if you want to take a chance on love or whatever, do it. Life's too short to spend it somewhere you don't want to be. I can't just quit. I'm not asking you to quit, I'm saying take a leave of absence. A month, 2 months, however long it takes to figure this out. Your job will be here if you want to come back, and if you don't, she shrugged, then we'll figure something else out. Remote work, freelance, whatever, but don't let logistics stop you from going after what you really want. I stared at her, overwhelmed by the unexpected support. Why are you being so nice about this? Sandra smiled. Because 20 years ago I let logistics stop me from moving to Boston with the love of my life. I told myself my job was too important, my life was here, it wouldn't work. You know what happened. She moved without me, found someone else, built a life I could have been part of, and I've regretted it every single day since. She met my eyes. Don't be me, Carter, don't spend your life wondering what if. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Sandra had said, about Marcus's advice, about the way Jake had looked at me in the barn before everything fell apart. Around 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and pulled out my laptop again. There had to be something we'd missed. Some angle, some solution, some way to save the ranch that didn't require access to that 10-inch strip. I started with the basics. The north pasture was essential because it provided access to water and allowed for proper grazing rotation. Without it, Jake couldn't expand his herd, which meant the ranch would continue to barely break even. The conservation easement had been perfect because it solved the access problem while giving the Forest Service something they valued. But the land survey error had killed that option. Jake didn't own the western acreage to trade, so what did he own that the Forest Service might want? I pulled up satellite maps, property records, environmental surveys, studied the landscape with fresh eyes, and slowly, very slowly, an idea began to form. The western boundary wasn't the only valuable habitat on Jake's property. There was also the southern section, a riparian corridor along a creek that fed into a larger watershed. It was smaller than the western parcel, only about 15 acres, but it was pristine. No development, no heavy grazing, just natural habitat that had been untouched for decades. What if Jake offered that instead? It was smaller, but the location might make it more valuable to the Forest Service. Riparian corridors were critical for wildlife, for water quality, for ecosystem connectivity. They might prefer 15 acres of riparian habitat over 20 acres of rocky upland. My heart started racing. This could work. It might actually work. But I needed to verify that the southern parcel was definitely, unquestionably Jake's property, needed to make sure there were no other survey errors, no other complications. I spent the rest of the night digging through property records, historical surveys, title documents. By the time the sun came up, I was fairly certain the southern parcel was clean. No disputed boundaries, no complications, just 15 acres of pristine riparian habitat that Jake owned free and clear. It wasn't the same as the original proposal. It was smaller, less dramatic, but it might be enough, and more importantly, it was possible. I needed to tell Jake, needed to call him right now and explain. But I stopped myself. He'd asked for space. And yes, this was important, but maybe I needed to respect his request. Maybe I needed to present this properly, through Pete, through official channels, instead of barging back into Jake's life when he'd specifically asked me not to. With shaking hands, I drafted an email to Pete Donovan, explaining the alternate proposal, attached maps, property records, environmental surveys, made the case that 15 acres of riparian habitat might be more valuable than 20 acres of upland, hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I called Jake. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. His voice, recorded and impersonal. "You've reached Jake Whitman, leave a message." "Hey," I said, my voice rough from lack of sleep. "It's me. I know you asked for space and I'm trying to respect that, but I think I found something, an alternate proposal. I just sent it to Pete. It might not work, but it's worth a try. So, yeah, call me when you get this, or don't, whatever you need." I paused, then added quietly, "I miss you, and I'm not giving up on us, on any of this." I hung up and stared at my phone, willing it to ring, but it stayed silent. 3 days passed with no word from Jake. Pete, however, responded almost immediately. He loved the alternate proposal, said the riparian corridor was actually more valuable to the Forest Service than the western parcel would have been, said he'd push it through as top priority, that he was optimistic they could get approval within a few months. A few months, not the 30 days Richard had given Jake, but faster than the original timeline. Maybe fast enough to matter if Jake could convince his father to wait just a little longer. I forwarded Pete's email to Jake with a simple message: "This could work, please don't give up." Still no response. On the 4th day, I couldn't take it anymore. I called Jake's number again, and this time he answered on the 2nd ring. "Carter," his voice was flat, exhausted. "Did you get my emails, the alternate proposal? Pete thinks it could work, Jake. It's not perfect, but it's a real chance." "I saw them." And I couldn't keep the desperate hope out of my voice. "What do you think?" "I think it's brilliant, creative, exactly the kind of solution I should have expected from you." He paused. "But it doesn't matter." "What do you mean it doesn't matter?" "My father signed the papers yesterday. The Harrisons own the ranch now. It's done." The world tilted. No, he said 30 days. You had 30 days to. They offered to close early if he dropped the price by $200,000. He took the deal. Jake's laugh was hollow. Guess he wanted to get it over with. Can't say I blame him. I couldn't breathe. After everything, after finding a solution that could actually work, it was too late. Jake had lost the ranch because his father couldn't wait 3 more weeks. "Jake, I'm so sorry. I should have worked faster, should have found this solution sooner." "Don't," his voice cracked. "Please don't apologize. You did more than anyone had a right to ask. This isn't on you." "Then who is it on?" I was crying now, hot tears of frustration and grief. "Because it sure as hell isn't on you. You fought for that place harder than anyone I've ever known." "Yeah, well, fighting doesn't always mean winning." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm leaving Montana. There's a job opportunity in Wyoming, working as a ranch manager for a big operation. It's not mine, but it's work, it's something." Wyoming, the word felt like a punch. "When?" "End of the week. There's nothing keeping me here now. The house is sold with the property. My stuff fits in a truck. Might as well get a fresh start." Jake, I didn't know what to say, how to convince him not to run, not to give up on everything including us. "What about?" "Don't," he cut me off, and I could hear the tears he was holding back. "Don't ask me about us. I can't think about that right now. I just lost everything, Carter. I need time to put myself back together before I can even think about what comes next." "Okay," the word barely made it out past the lump in my throat. "Okay, take whatever time you need." "Thank you for everything, for coming back, for trying, for," his voice broke, "for making me believe, even for a little while, that I could have both, the ranch and you." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat in my apartment, phone clutched in my hand, and let myself fall apart. Great, heaving sobs that shook my whole body. For Jake, for the ranch, for us, for all the things we'd almost had and lost. Marcus found me like that an hour later, let himself in with his key, and just held me while I cried. "He's leaving," I managed eventually, "moving to Wyoming, starting over." "Are you going to let him?" Marcus asked quietly. "Let him, Marcus? He lost his family's ranch. He's devastated. What am I supposed to do, show up and make it about me?" "No, you're supposed to show up and remind him that he didn't lose everything, that he still has you if he wants you, that starting over doesn't mean starting alone." Marcus pulled back to look at me. "Or you can sit here and let him leave and spend the rest of your life wondering what if. Your choice." I spent that night planning. If I was going to do this, if I was going to make some grand gesture worthy of a romance novel, I needed to do it right. I needed to make Jake understand that I wasn't giving up on us, wasn't walking away just because things were hard. By morning, I had a plan. It was crazy and probably wouldn't work, but I had to try. First, I called my boss and officially took the leave of absence she'd offered. Then I called my landlord and explained I'd need to break my lease or find a subletter. Called Marcus and told him he'd need a new roommate. Started dismantling my Seattle life with methodical efficiency. Because I'd finally figured out what Marcus and Sandra, and probably everyone else, had known for years. Seattle wasn't home. It had never been home. Home was a ranch in Montana, and a man in a cowboy hat who'd stolen my heart when we were kids. Next, I called Richard Whitman. "Carter," he sounded surprised to hear from me, "is everything all right?" "No, actually, everything is not all right. Your son is moving to Wyoming because he thinks he lost everything. But he didn't lose everything, Mr. Whitman. He still has me. and I need your help to make him see that." There was a long pause. What kind of help? I explained my plan. It was audacious and required Richard to make some uncomfortable admissions, but to my surprise, he didn't shut me down immediately. "You continue. 2:17 p.m. Really love him," he said when I finished. "More than anything, but he won't let himself believe it right now because he thinks I'll leave again, that I'll realize Montana is too small and he's not enough and I'll run back to Seattle. I need to prove to him that I'm not going anywhere." "And you think this plan will do that?" "I think it's worth a shot." I took a breath. "Look, I know I'm nobody to you, just some kid who grew up with your son, but I'm asking you father to father, no, person to person, help me do this. Help me give Jake something to fight for again." Richard was quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally, "All right, I'll help, but Carter, if you hurt him, if you make promises you can't keep, I will make your life very difficult. Understood?" "Understood, thank you." The last call was the hardest. Pete Donovan. "Carter, I heard about the sale. I'm so sorry. If we'd moved faster." "It's okay, Pete. Actually, I need to ask you something. The Harrisons, what are their development plans for the ranch? Specifically, are they planning to use the northern pasture?" "Not for grazing, no. They're planning to build luxury cabins up there, capitalize on the views and privacy." He paused. "Why?" "Because if they're not using it for grazing, they don't need access to that 10-inch strip, which means they might be willing to grant an easement." My heart was pounding. "Pete, could the Forest Service work with the new owners? Structure a deal where the Harrisons get something in exchange for granting access to that disputed boundary?" I could practically hear the wheels turning in Pete's head. "That's actually not a bad idea. If the Harrisons don't need the access themselves, they might be amenable to an easement in exchange for, say, some kind of partnership with the Forest Service. Reduced property taxes, recreational permits, something like that." "Could you call them, feel them out?" I was barely breathing. "Because if there's a way to make this work, if there's a way to give Jake back what he lost." "I'll call them today," Pete promised. "Can't guarantee anything, but it's worth exploring." After I hung up, I sat in my empty apartment, half-packed boxes everywhere, my life in Seattle already being dismantled, and let myself hope. Maybe this was crazy. Maybe I was setting myself up for heartbreak, but I'd rather take the risk than spend the rest of my life wondering what if. I drove through the night, reaching Montana just as the sun was coming up over the mountains. The ranch looked different already. There was a surveying crew marking out where the Harrisons planned to build, and seeing stakes in the ground where Jake's cattle should have been grazing made my chest tight. But I wasn't here for the ranch, I was here for Jake. I found him at his father's house in town, loading boxes into his truck. He looked exhausted, thinner than he'd been just a week ago, like grief was physically consuming him. When he saw me climbing out of my car, he froze. "Carter, what are you doing here?" Being stubborn, I walked toward him, my heart pounding. Being unreasonable, being in love with you. Jake's eyes widened. You can't just show up and say things like that. You have a life in Seattle, a career. You can't just throw that away." "I already did. I quit my job, well, took a leave of absence that's basically quitting. Broke my lease, packed up everything I own." I gestured to my car, still loaded with boxes. "I'm moving back to Montana, Jake, whether you want me here or not." "That's insane," but I could see hope flickering in his eyes, warring with disbelief. "You're going to give up everything for what? A failing rancher with no prospects?" "For the man I love." I closed the distance between us, taking his hands in mine. "For my best friend. For the person who makes me feel like home, no matter where we are." "Carter," his voice broke on my name, and I saw tears starting to form. "I don't have anything to offer you. No ranch, no stable future, no. You have you, that's all I need." I squeezed his hands. "Jake, I don't care about the ranch. I mean, I care because you care, because it meant something to you. But it's not why I'm here. I'm here because 3 years ago I ran away from the best thing that ever happened to me, and I'm not making that mistake again." "But what if," he was crying openly now, "what if I'm not enough? What if you realize you made a mistake, gave up too much? Then we'll figure it out together." I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight while he shook. "Jake, stop trying to protect me from making my own choices. I choose you, I choose us, even if it's messy and complicated and uncertain." For a long moment, he just held onto me, his face buried in my shoulder. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were red but also lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. "I love you," he whispered. "God, I love you so much. I've been trying to convince myself I'd be okay without you, but I wouldn't be. I'd be miserable." "Then stop trying." I kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. Let yourself be happy, let us be happy. Okay, he laughed through his tears. Okay, but where are we going to live? What are you going to do for work? How? We'll figure it out, I kissed him again, one impossible problem at a time. It turned out Richard had been busy on his end too. While Jake and I were having our reunion, Richard had been meeting with the Harrisons and Pete Donovan. By the time we got back to the ranch that afternoon, there was news. The Harrisons are willing to grant an easement, Pete explained, spreading maps across the hood of his truck. In exchange, the Forest Service will give them a recreational use permit for part of the adjacent federal land. They're planning to offer guided horseback tour as part of their luxury retreat, and having access to Forest Service trails makes that much more viable. But that doesn't help Jake, I said, confused. The Harrisons own the ranch now, he can't. Actually, Richard interrupted, looking uncomfortable. That's where I come in. I talked to the Harrisons, explained the situation with Jake, with the easement, with everything, and I made them an offer. He pulled out some papers. I'm buying the ranch back, for the price they paid, plus 10% for their trouble. Jake stared at his father, speechless. What? I made a mistake. Richard's voice was rough with emotion. I let finances and practicality override everything else. I forgot that some things matter more than balance sheets. Your mother knew that, you know that, and I should have remembered it. He held out the papers. The ranch is yours again, Jake, if you want it. Dad, Jake's voice broke. I can't let you, that's too much money. Consider it your inheritance early. Richard's eyes were wet. Your mother would have wanted you to have this place, to build your life here. And he stopped, swallowed hard. I want that too. I want you to be happy, even if I don't always understand the choices you make. Jake looked at the papers, then at his father, then at me. I could see the emotions warring across his face: disbelief, hope, gratitude, fear. There's one condition, Richard added. You have to make this place work, really work. Use the easement, expand your operation, do whatever it takes, because I'm not doing this again. This is your one shot. I'll make it work. Jake's voice was steady now, certain. I promise, Dad, I'll make it work. Richard nodded, and then, in a move that surprised everyone, he pulled Jake into a fierce hug. I'm proud of you, son. Your mother would be too. Pete cleared his throat, giving them a moment. The easement paperwork should be finalized within the month, and with the Southern Riparian Corridor easement Carter proposed, you'll actually come out ahead. More grazing land, protected habitat, and a partnership with the Forest Service that opens up opportunities for sustainable tourism. Sustainable tourism? Jake looked at me confused. I've been thinking, I said, pulling out my own laptop. What if you didn't just run cattle? What if you also offered something like what the Harrisons were planning, but smaller scale, more authentic? Host a few guests at a time, teach them about ranching, about conservation, about sustainable agriculture. People pay good money for that kind of authentic experience. Jake's eyes were wide as he looked through my mock-up proposals. You did all this. I had a 6-hour drive and a lot of nervous energy. I shrugged. It's just ideas. We can figure out what actually makes sense. But the point is, there are options now. Ways to diversify income while keeping the ranch true to what your mom envisioned. We, Jake repeated, focusing on that word. You said we. Yeah, I took his hand. If you'll have me as a partner, in business and in life. Jake looked at his father, who was smiling despite the tears on his face. Looked at Pete, who was grinning like he'd just solved the world's problems. Looked at me, and I saw everything I'd ever wanted reflected in his eyes. Yeah, he said softly, I'll have you. The next few weeks were chaos. Good chaos, but chaos nonetheless. We filed paperwork for the easements, met with the Forest Service representatives, started planning the ranch expansion. I set up a home office and began taking on freelance design work remotely, discovering I could actually make decent money without being tied to a physical office. Jake and I fell into a rhythm, mornings working cattle, afternoons handling business planning, evenings wrapped up together on the couch, exhausted but happy. We had our first real fight about 3 weeks in, over something stupid like how to organize the barn equipment, made up in the tack room with frantic kisses and apologies. It wasn't perfect. Some days were hard, when the work felt overwhelming or money was tight or we had to make difficult decisions about the ranch's future, but we faced it together, and that made all the difference. Richard started visiting more often, making an effort to understand the operation instead of just seeing it as a financial burden. He and Jake were rebuilding their relationship slowly, carefully, like men learning to trust each other again. 3 months after I'd moved back, Pete Donovan showed up with news. The Forest Service had approved both easements. Jake officially had access to the northern pasture and a partnership that would bring in supplemental income through educational programs and conservation grants. You did it, Pete said, shaking Jake's hand. You saved your mom's ranch. That night, Jake and I rode out to the northern pasture, the land he'd fought so hard to access. We sat on the fence line, watching the sun set over mountains that would never be carved up into vacation rentals, over land that would stay wild and working for generations to come. I can't believe this is real, Jake murmured, his arm around my shoulders. After everything, we actually pulled it off. We did, I leaned into him, breathing in the smell of hay and horses and the man I loved, though I'm pretty sure I never actually completed that original promise, the one about 10 inches of effort. Jake laughed, the sound rich and warm. Oh, I don't know, I'd say you put in way more than 10 inches of effort, more like 10 miles. Terrible math, I teased, but I'll take it. We sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and stars began appearing overhead, the kind of stars you can only see away from city lights, brilliant and infinite and full of possibility. Carter, Jake's voice was quiet. Thank you for coming back, for believing in this place, for loving me. I turned to look at him, this man who'd been my best friend, my first love, my reason for coming home. Thank you for letting me, for fighting for us, for being brave enough to want both, the ranch and me. Always both, he whispered, and kissed me under stars that had watched over this land for thousands of years, and would watch for thousands more. 6 months later, we hosted our first guests for the ranch's new agritourism program. A family from Chicago who wanted their kids to learn about where food came from, about conservation, about the work that went into sustainable ranching. Watching Jake teach them to fix a fence, to move cattle, to read the land, he was in his element. This was what he was meant to do, and I got to help him do it. At night, after the guests were settled in the small cabin we'd renovated, Jake and I sat on our porch now, in the house we'd made into a home. He pulled me into his lap, and I went willingly, settling against his chest with my head tucked under his chin. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn and familiar. Remember this. It was my promise from when we were teenagers, the one about 10 inches of effort for 10 years of dedication. I laughed, running my finger over my cramped handwriting. I think we can safely say you fulfilled your end of the bargain, Jake said softly, and I want to make you a promise in return. He unfolded a new piece of paper, this one in his handwriting. I, Jake Whitman, promise Carter Bennett my heart, my home, and every moment of every day for as long as he'll have me. No 10-year limit, no impossible conditions, just us building something together that's worth more than any amount of land or money or success. Signed this day with all my love. My eyes were burning as I looked up at him. Jake. I know it's fast, he said quickly. We've only been together 6 months, we're still figuring things out. But Carter, I've loved you since I was 16 years old. I know exactly what I want, and it's you. Forever, if you want that too. Yes, I didn't have to think about it. Yes, I want that too. He kissed me then, deep and sure and full of promise. When we finally broke apart, I was laughing and crying at the same time. Should we make it official? I asked. The promise, I mean, sign it in blood or something. Absolutely not, Jake was grinning. I'm not letting you anywhere near sharp objects when you're emotional, but maybe we could frame them both, hang them next to each other, the original promise and this one. I love that idea, I kissed him again. I love you. I love you too, he held me closer. Thank you for keeping your promise, for giving me 10 inches of effort when I needed it most. Pretty sure I gave you way more than 10 inches, I teased, and he laughed, the sound echoing across the land we'd fought so hard to save. Epilogue 2 years later. The ranch was thriving. Jake had expanded the herd, brought in heritage breed cattle that commanded premium prices. Our agritourism program was booked solid through next summer, with a waiting list we were still trying to figure out how to accommodate. We'd hired 2 ranch hands to help with the workload, and I'd built a successful freelance design business that let me work from anywhere. But the best part wasn't the success or the money or even the land. The best part was this, coming home after a long day to find Jake in the kitchen, cooking dinner while he hummed off-key to country music. The way he still looked at me like I hung the moon. The life we'd built together, messy and imperfect, and absolutely everything I'd ever wanted. Richard visited more often now, and he and Jake had fully reconciled. They'd never have a conventional relationship. Richard was still too practical, Jake still too much of a dreamer, but there was love there and respect, and that was enough. On our 2nd anniversary of officially being together, Jake took me riding up to the northern pasture. We'd done this dozens of times, but this trip felt different somehow. He was nervous, kept fidgeting with his reins in a way that wasn't like him. When we reached the fence line, The same spot where this had all started, where we'd first kissed, where he'd first told me he loved me. Jake dismounted and helped me down. Then he took my hands and looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Carter Bennett," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You drove through a storm for me. You gave up your life in Seattle for me. You helped me save this ranch and build a future I didn't think was possible. You kept a promise you made when we were kids, even when it would have been easier to walk away." "Jake." "Let me finish," he smiled, squeezing my hands. "I want to make you a new promise, not on paper this time, not something we hang on a wall, a promise between us and this land that's been our witness from the start." He got down on one knee and my heart stopped. Pulled a ring from his pocket, simple silver, handmade by a local artist, with a small turquoise stone from the creek. "Will you marry me?" Jake's voice was thick with emotion. "Will you be my partner in all things, for as long as we both shall live?" I was crying, laughing, falling to my knees in front of him. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring on my finger, and then we were kissing, laughing, holding each other like we'd never let go. The horses grazed peacefully beside us. And the sun set over mountains that had watched our entire story unfold. Later, back at the house, tangled together in our bed, Jake traced patterns on my back with gentle fingers. "So," he murmured, "think we'll have to write new promises, make them official." "I don't think we need to," I said, pressing a kiss to his chest. "I think we've been keeping promises to each other since we were kids. Every day we choose us, that's a promise kept." "I like that," Jake pulled me closer. "Every day I choose you." "Every day I choose you too." The wedding was small, just close friends, family and ranch hands who'd become like family. We held it right there on the land, with Pete Donovan officiating, and Richard giving us both away with tears in his eyes. Marcus flew in from Seattle and gave a speech about stubborn love and second chances that had everyone crying. But the moment that mattered most was standing under a handmade arch decorated with wildflowers, looking into Jake's eyes and promising to love him through every season. Through harsh winters and dry summers, through good years and hard years, through everything life would throw at us. "I promise," I said, holding his hands tight, "to be your partner in all things, to help you chase impossible dreams, to give you 10 inches of effort every single day in everything we do together." Jake smiled through his tears. "I promise to choose you every day in every way, to build a life with you that honors where we came from and reaches toward where we're going, to love you with everything I am for as long as I breathe." When we kissed as husbands, sealing promises that went so much deeper than words, I felt the rightness of it settle into my bones. This was home. Not the ranch, not Montana, not even this beautiful land we'd fought to save. Home was Jake, and Jake was home, and as long as we had each other, we had everything that mattered. Years would pass. The ranch would have good seasons and bad ones. We'd face challenges we couldn't anticipate, make mistakes we'd have to learn from, grow and change and figure things out as we went. But through all of it, we'd have each other. We'd have the promise we made when we were kids, 10 inches of effort for 10 years of dedication, that had grown into something so much bigger than either of us had imagined. Because some promises aren't about the letter of the agreement. They're about the spirit behind it, the willingness to show up, to try, to give everything you have for the people and things you love. And that's a promise worth keeping, every single day for the rest of your life. The end.